Hello and welcome to News of the Week again. So this week I've been going through a lot of reports and media information and opinion pieces, all kind of revolving around the question, where is the recession? Now let's just go back a few months or maybe to the beginning of the year, and you may remember that everybody was saying 2023 will probably be a year where the United States and other Western countries will experience a recession. So now we're halfway through the year and the question is, where is it? Now, the opinion that I have about it and why we don't see or have seen it yet is related to a few things. Number one is recession definition, at least in the past, was always to say 2 quarters in a row where we have negative or no growth. And we had that already in 2022 for a while, but they said, no, that's technical, that's not official, that's not really a recession. So we had a little bit of it. The other part is that there is always mechanisms, like we have all experienced. I've made a bunch of videos about the fact that the Federal Reserve keeps increasing interest rates to get inflation down. And when you look at the official numbers, which I always find comical because they put the numbers together in the government in a way that makes it look as good as possible, regardless whether that's reality. But when you look at those numbers, you will see that even the official numbers have come down from 9% to 7% to 5% to now somewhere in the 4% area. Now, if you look at the core stuff, the stuff that you and I actually go out and use with the money that we make, whether it's groceries or gas or any kind of other things that we consume, the inflation is much more in the 5-6% and in certain things even higher percentage points. So where is the recession remains the question. If you look at what economists say, I looked, like I said, this week in the reports a little more because it's a slow time of the year in the middle of the summer. And what I found is that a lot of the so-called experts say, well, the recession hasn't really hit yet because during the pandemic, there were lots and lots and lots of government programs to the tune of $2, $3, $4 trillion that have been distributed into the public. And not everybody went around and said, or even had an opportunity to go around and say, okay, well, now I got this government money, I go out and spend it. Partially because there was just no place to spend it, and partially because people actually paid off older debt and credit card debt and stuff like that, and any leftover money was put aside. So there is a certain amount of money in the population that hasn't been spent out of all this largesse that the government gave out to help with the pandemic. So that's one part. The other part, and I think this shouldn't be underestimated, is that this whole process since the end of the pandemic has been going on for a while, and obviously people had an opportunity to ask for higher wages, for wage increases that they typically got in the area between 5 and 10%. And when you look, for example, a really core example that I would encourage you to take a closer look at, now that we're getting closer back to negotiations, I think it is September 14th when the negotiations between the big auto companies and the unions are going to start. And if you look at what the unions actually ask, will tell you a little bit why we have not seen the recession yet and why it might still be a little bit further delayed. The UAW, the auto industry unions, have literally asked for an increase in wages, in simplified terms, of 40% in the next 4 years. Now, on first glance, you would say, wow, 40% in the next 4 years, that's a huge amount. Why could they ask for that, or why would they ever get away with that? Well, one thing that typically happens is, especially in unionized environments, but in general for most of us, for at least everybody who has a job, a normal W-2 job, is you do the work and you get some merit increases to your wages and salaries of typically something like 3 to 5%. Now, what happened between 2020 and 2023 is that in reality, prices went up much more. And what we oftentimes forget is it's accumulative. What does that mean? Let's say something costs $50 in the store to get a certain amount of groceries that you go buy, and there was 5% inflation in 2020. So 5% inflation means it costs $52.50 at the end of 2020. Then let's say in 2021, we have another 5% inflation. Now the same thing costs $56. Then in 2022, we had almost 10% inflation across the board. Now that 10% takes it from 55 to 60. And then this year we had again 5%, so it's basically 63. But if you take these together, what I mean by accumulative is it's not when we say we have 5% inflation, it's 5% on the $50. No, it's 5% on the $60 that it's now, right? So it adds and adds and adds and makes it more and more expensive, which means the negotiations for wages are always behind. So we're paying for the same basket $60 versus $50, which is $10 more, which is somewhere in the area of 20% just in those 3 years. And it's been 4 years since the unions have negotiated. So why are they asking for 40%? Well, partially because they want to make up for what they lost in the last 4 years. And they lost it because at the time when they last negotiated, nobody anticipated that we would have 5 and 8 and 6 and 10% inflation. So they thought, well, inflation has been very low. We get a 3 to 5% increase and that will be fine for our workers. But in reality, it wasn't low. And now they want to make it up. And obviously they are anticipating, best knowledge right now, is inflation will stick around. So they also want to make sure that they get at least compensated for the future inflation coming. And that's how you get 40% for 4 years or 10% per year. So from that perspective, I can understand it. But how does that relate to the recession? And may it be coming or not? Well, if they get a contract that basically says in the next 4 years they're going to get 10% for each worker working in that industry, then what's happening is what's called a wage spiral. Inflation will start creeping up again because the employers have to pay their people more, which they can only do by increasing prices. And there comes a point when this recession fear that everybody's been talking about for almost a year will come true, just because when prices keep increasing, there comes a point where people just can't afford to buy certain things anymore. And they will ask themselves, is it really this important that I get this thing? Can I really afford it? Or are there more fundamental things that I definitely need and need to basically make sure that I can buy with the money that I have? So in my opinion, the reason we have not seen the recession that everybody has been talking about is because it's still a little early. It's more likely that it happens early next year or maybe at the end of this year. But most important is how much will wages increase, because I don't think prices for goods will increase that much more. They might actually be 4 or 5%, but the wages need to catch up, and that will ultimately start the next cycle. And it might as well be that there is a recession. Now, what do we do with this? What we really want to look at is that we be very, very specific and careful and really analyze whenever we have turnover in our properties, who the next tenants are and what kind of jobs they have. Because that will guide, can they pay the rent in the future? Not so much because we want to increase the rent, but because they need to be able to have income. And one thing that happens in recessions is that unemployment will come up. More people will lose their jobs. And we don't want our tenants to be working in jobs where it's likely that they're going to lose them. So keep an eye for that, but relax. It's summertime. The recession hasn't shown up yet. And when it will, there will be a new news of the week and we will talk about it. Until then, stay safe, be well, and enjoy the summer. I talk to you next week.